huge thanks to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. What iteration should you make on winning creatives? Should you even bother iterating on losing creatives? This is the exact iteration I made recently that spent $2 million and had a 3 ROAS. What's up, marketers? I have a hot take that tends to surprise people. When looking at your creative testing, you should spend 90% of your tests on net new creatives and only 10% on iterations. Why? I'll let you know when we get to iteration 4. We're going to go through 10 of my favorite iterations to make on creative tests, starting from beginner level all the way up to advanced. So let's dive in. Number 1 is messaging iterations. And yes, this is the easiest iteration to make, which is why we are starting here. And I also think it's one of the most common forms of iterations. Here you're simply going to leave the creative as is and swap out the most important messaging for something new. And this is the exact type of iteration that I made to spend $2 million on a creative test recently. And it ended up having a 3 ROAS. I actually made that iteration back in July, and it is still the top performer in the ad account as of November 2024. Now, how did I know what type of messaging to switch out, right? I actually think that this is where a lot of people mess up. So what I actually did is I looked at 8 of the other top performing creatives, and I took the messaging points from those creatives and altered them a little bit so that they could be put on this particular static. Some of these messaging points that I was trying out were testimonials. Some were a little bit more superlative in nature, like this, but the messaging point that ended up winning out was actually based on something that was like this. Sorry that I can't show you the actual creative. NDAs, we can all relate, right? Now, a really important note about this type of iteration, I would only really spend time doing this iteration if you have a creative that's really winning. We saw the original creative performing for several months, but I just knew that we could get more juice out of the squeeze, which is why I decided to do a really straightforward messaging iteration test. Number 2, edit iterations, and we're just going to talk about visuals here. Now, especially if you find a piece of creator content or video content doing well, I would swap out how you're doing the visuals, particularly in the hook. So I'd make iterations for this using a green screen, using a split screen, as well as using more of a grid style format. These seem to be really popular moving into 2025. Now, I was thrilled to partner with Storyblocks on this particular video because if you can't find the right type of creator content, I actually really like looking through their asset library to find something to fit in with this type of iteration. Storyblocks has a curated content library that has everything you need to create high quality video ads for Meta in just one place, with over 1 million 4K and HD footage, templates, music, sound effects, images, and more. And they are constantly adding new clips, so there's always something new to test with your ad creative. And the best part is, anything that you download with Storyblocks is 100% royalty free and safe to use on your ad creative. And you don't have to plan a photo shoot, fumble around with AI solutions, or hire a creator to make that content for you. It is literally instantaneous, and it works just as well. To get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/Dara Denney or click the link in the description. Now, number 3 is another variation on edit iterations that you can do really easily. And this is going to be more for your messaging visuals. So this is really going to change how your messaging is going to show up, particularly in your video creative. So if I find a piece of creator content or a video piece of content that's doing really well, I also really like to test out that exact same asset with a TikTok response bubble with a new headline. And here's where you can also get creative, swapping in different types of messaging to really highlight what the asset is going to be all about. You can also test out more native or brand-owned visuals. And another thing I want to mention is also captions. Now, this is also where I would have creative strategists coming up to me and be like, oh, we should do an A/B test to see if captions or no captions works better for this ad account. And it's so interesting. I've actually tested this several times recently across many different accounts. And really, there's not much conclusive evidence either way. Let me know in the comments if this is a test that you've done recently, because I'm a little lost. I'm actually starting to not use as many captions inside of my ad creative, and it seems to be performing just as well. But I'm kind of curious if you guys are seeing the same thing. And number 4 is format iterations. If you find that a piece of creative is doing well and you already did a few variation tests within that initial test and you found that just one specific variation iteration is really doing well, it is safe to assume that it is likely going to be a part of the messaging, which is why it's working so well. My main point here is that if you find that a piece of messaging is doing well, try it out across different formats and really try changing the look and feel of that drastically. So if you find something that's winning on video creative, for instance, try developing that into a wide range of image assets too. Something that I've had a big learning on recently, and I've talked about with a lot of other creative strategists, is how much more the messaging impacts the creative as opposed to the format or the visuals. Now, I've spent over $100 million on meta ads, and one of the biggest mistakes that I see junior creative strategists making is that they think that they can only make iterations based on data, or they can only make creative tests based on the prior learnings that they have. And that's a really good instinct, but sometimes I think it puts you in big danger of what I call iteration paralysis. This is where all of your creatives end up looking and feeling the same to users, which means that it's really hard to scale out of that minimum viable customer. That's why I'm really encouraging teams to have 90% net new creative and only 10% iterations, because most of the times when teams are doing iterations, they are simply doing the first messaging iterations, and they're carrying the same look and feel throughout all of their creatives because they think they have that learning, that's what's going to do better. But it actually just makes everything look and feel the same, which puts you in the risk of having creative fatigue a lot easier. One of the big ways that you can get out of that is by doing format iterations. So keeping the messaging points that you know are doing well and putting them into wildly different visuals and formats. That was a long one. Number 5 is creator iterations. This is a pretty easy concept in theory, but if you find that a certain piece of UGC content is doing well, simply try it with a new creator. Now, I've also done this with creative briefs. So if I find, this specific brief tends to produce really good creative, then I'll just try and give that to as many creators as I can. Now, another way that you can look at this iteration too is by looking at the types of creator content that performed well for you and really zoning in on, what types of demographics are really working here? Is it a certain age, a certain race, a certain vibe, a certain sort of curation that the creator is going for, and really trying to replicate that. But I will say, don't try to go down this path too long. Really try to keep your creators as diverse as possible and really encourage them to lean into their own unique style. That's where you're going to get the most juice out of the squeeze for this. But I do find sometimes, hey, it really is just as easy as taking a winning script and trying it with a new creator. My favorite way to do this actually is if you find that a specific script works with someone a lot older or a lot younger, go the complete opposite so that you can open up into a net new demographic. And number 6 is green screen over an ad. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh my God, we already talked about green screen. I'm actually saying if you have a winning ad creative, simply do a green screen over that exact ad asset. This is something that I saw Oats Overnight do quite a bit, and I've tried myself on a number of brands, and it really does work. Especially if you had a few of those unicorn smashing ad creatives that everyone seems to have seen, having a creator react to that type of content by using the green screen effect, I have seen to be really, really fun and effective. And what's great is you can use this not only on images, but also video creative as well. And it also turns a lot of your winning image creatives into video, which is very, very cool to test. And number 7, now we're getting a lot deeper into messaging strategies. And this first messaging strategy that you can think about making iterations on is really a part of the user journey. Now, I've shown this slide in a few videos recently about how to make more scalable creative. Essentially what this iteration is simply identifying which part of the user journey this messaging or this creative is targeting and trying to go even further up funnel by making it more educational, making it more humorous, inciting more curiosity in the ad creative. This is one that I've tested out a few times, especially recently, and it almost always results in extending the length of how long the creative is performing. Number 8, another great messaging iteration is looking into the human desire that is being elicited in your ad creative and simply trying a new one. Maybe you're looking at your ad creative and you're like, I'm not really sure if I'm leaning into a key human desire here. Well, this would be a good iteration to test then. Now, the place that I learned about the key human desires was from Stephen Rice, who wrote that there were 16 key human desires that motivate people not only into buying, but really just motivate them in their everyday lives. And I found the ones that tend to really work a lot in advertising are ones like beauty and romance, power as well as family. Actually, one of my big learnings in 2024 was that a lot of ad creative that I saw in the top performers actually in some way referred to someone's family or family member. Your family is inherently incredibly emotional. So what I would suggest is taking a look at your top performing creative and seeing, how can I actually inject a family angle or even another human desire angle into that ad creative to test? This is one that I feel is actually pretty advanced. I've only really talked about it in my course. So if you're interested in me doing a video on the 16 human desires, let me know. I would be so happy to make that video. I think it's long overdue. Number 9 is actually just for one type of ad creative, which is a founder's ad. So this is the type of iterations I would do on founders ads. And some of this is actually based on a recent conversation I had with Barry Hott. So be sure to go follow him over on Twitter. He is also coming out with a course soon, which I am very, very excited about. I am also going to be doing a lesson with you guys in there. So be sure to go follow him and to sign up for his course. It's truly amazing. But the specific founder ad iteration is a lot of times when I'm working with brands, I'll see that they've done a few more lo-fi founders ad iterations, which is great. It's a great place to start. But this is actually the number one piece of ad creative that I would suggest you taking more hi-fi. And if you really want to try doing some more high production value ad creative, the founders ad is absolutely 100% the one that's most likely to perform. There was actually an ad creative that I produced that was more hi-fi in nature over 4 years ago, and it is still running today in the ad account. And I'll say the reason why I think this ad creative really performs and why many other high production founders ads I've seen work is because they're not actually writing out as much of a script. They are actually asking the founder questions, right? So when I would conduct these founders interviews at Thesis, I would actually have 10 to 20 questions that I would be asking them to really elicit more emotional storytelling and responses from the founder. A lot of times if you do something that is more scripted, it just, kind of comes out blah. But that's why if you take the approach of actually asking a founder questions and getting the type of content that way, that's what I've seen work really, really well. And again, Barry Hott is someone I've seen talk about this recently, and it's absolutely something that I want to underscore and underline. So that's a very, very good iteration to make if you find either, I want to invest in something that's a little bit more high production, or, I haven't seen my founders ads work as well. This might be why, and you might want to actually try asking your founder questions as opposed to giving them a script. And number 10, I actually want to talk about losing creatives, right? So a lot of times we'll see, the specific creative didn't actually work that well. Is it worth making iterations on? I would say 9 out of 10 times, do not make iterations on losing creative. It's losing for a reason. So why would you want to iterate on something that isn't high confidence? You'd actually probably want to iterate on something that you have a lot higher confidence in. However, there are times where I have iterated on losing creatives, and it's because I realized that we really made a mistake in the editing or in the messaging. So this is actually where I would look back at all of the 9 other iterations, particularly the messaging ones, the user journey ones, the human desire ones, and ask yourself, is there something that I could have done here way better to elicit that type of emotional response or knowing from the user? Then I'd say, you try making an iteration then. But otherwise, sometimes creatives are just meant to die. But maybe that's the one that people don't agree with me on. Let me know in the comments. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Love you. Bye.